lot of information to share, and thank you for being here with us this morning. The last day of the conference, you're the stalwart, wonderful, brave few who are still with us, so thank you. And you've got social distancing down, so we appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about what we're calling J-1 winning strategies for exchange visitor English proficiency. And so this is going to give what we hope is kind of a good industry overview of some of the trends and statistics in the field. And so we've got some good stuff to share with you concerning a couple of surveys that have been conducted on J-1 scholar levels. And then we're going to also talk about some of the best practices and some of the challenges that we at different institutions have faced as we've looked at how we evaluate and move forward with the English proficiency regulations for the J-1 scholars. So to start, we'll do some quick introductions. I'll begin. My name is Sam Brown, and I am the Director for International Student and Scholar Services at Brigham Young University in Utah, and have been in the field for over a decade now and absolutely love it, and I'm grateful for the wonderful scholars we get to work with. We'll turn some time over to the others.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie Wilburs. I'm the Director of International Student Scholar Services at Vanderbilt University. Been working with J Scholars probably over a decade now, really enjoy it, and we really appreciate you being here this morning.
Hi, I'm Elise Johnson. I'm the Director of Exchange Visitor Services for the University of Florida. I've been in the field for about 6 to 7 years, I've worked with students F1s before, and for the past 4 years I've been working with our J1s.
I'm Moroni Flake. I'm with English 3, and we've been working with J1 scholars and their English proficiency since 2015, when the regulations when the current subpart A regulations were released.
Okay, so we wanted to start today with a poll, so I'm going to exit here and pull up. Here we go. So we're hopeful that you'll participate with this if you're willing to pull out your phones, and they've got the website here at the top. You respond to the pollev.com/JulieWilburs937, or you can text Julie Wilburs 937 to 37607. And we want to ask, of the following options, which do you fear most? A, sending a scholar home. B, a major health or safety incident with the scholar. C, a Department of State audit. Or D, facing department pushback from adjusting English policies. Hard to choose between so many good options, I know. We'll give you just a moment to navigate that poll. Okay, so for at least a couple of you, it looks like the biggest fear is a major health or safety incident with the scholar. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If you're looking at high stakes challenges, that's about as high stakes as they can get. And when somebody's life is harmed potentially because of something that happens. So, thank you for participating in that. We're going to jump back here now. And I'm going to turn some time over to Moroni to talk about some surveys that were conducted through his corporation.
All right, so we've been doing surveys every 2 years. We try to get an idea of what's the general sense of English proficiency policies in international offices, and monitoring those trends over time. And we've had 381 participants across 235 institutions, representing essentially all positions working with scholars. But predominantly we've had directors, associate or assistant directors, and advisors. And we've had representation from large and small scholar populations. And for the most part, they're consistent regardless of the size of the institution. And I'll highlight areas where they might be different. Okay, so first we start off basically which statement best represents your view of J1 English proficiency. And you'll see that 97% say that it is always, or at least occasionally, crucial to the success of the visit. So baseline, we view English proficiency as an important aspect of their experience. We asked, what are the risks of J1s arriving with insufficient English proficiency? And really strong results here as far as, let me make an adjustment really quick. Okay, so number one response was poor cultural experience, which aligns well with the purpose of the J-1 visa as cultural exchange. Next would be an inability to understand the rights and responsibilities as a visitor to the U.S., health and safety, and then an inability to participate in their program. I will say that recently the biggest changes to the responses have been the bottom two. It has been a State Department audit or visit, or sending a visitor home. Anecdotally, I can say that I hear that happening far more frequently than I heard previously. And I think some of the panelists will speak directly to that. But those are the results there. We asked, has your institution shortened an exchange visit due to insufficient English proficiency? 8% said yes, and I'll just read this quote here. They said, we had a number of scholars arrive with low English proficiency within a short time period, one of which did result in the scholar having to return home. This is why we feel so strongly that independent assessment of English proficiency is so important. Okay, so here's where we map kind of a snapshot in time. Here's what offices are doing today, and then here's kind of what's happened over time. So starting in 2015, when the current Subpart 8 requirements were released, 93% of institutions that responded said that they allowed the sponsoring department or PI to conduct an interview. The other responses were the English language department or an English language specialist, an individual at the institution, or the international office. We had one example there is Virginia Bloom at Texas A&M. They realized that the sponsoring department wasn't working for them, so she started doing all the interviews herself, and that's hundreds that she was doing by herself, so hats off to Virginia for doing that. And then if we look at the trends across time, we see consistent movement away from allowing the department or the PI to conduct the interview. Whereas now in this most recent survey, 52% of international offices allow a PI or department interview. And that's consistent regardless of size. It's most pronounced among state schools that bring in a few hundred scholars. And I would say it's probably least pronounced among like the top 20 institutions hosting the most scholars. So there's still movement there as well, but it's most pronounced within the state schools. And so yeah, 52% doing a sponsoring department or PI, 17% doing the English language department, and then 15% doing a third-party English assessment. And then going from there. We asked what drawbacks are associated with your current method. And I know there's a lot of numbers here, I'll just briefly walk through them. A lot of these intuitively make sense. So if there's a department interview, the primary drawbacks were the perception that they may not be qualified to evaluate English, it may not be at best practice, or the time required to complete the interviews. If the international office is conducting those interviews, it's the time required to complete the interviews and scheduling constraints, same concerns with the English language department. And so yeah, you see those listed there. What is your perspective of the current policy? And so of those who have the sponsoring department conducting the interview, 47% are satisfied. And then going up from there, 68% of the English language department individuals are satisfied with that policy, and then 92% for a third-party English assessment. This was an interesting takeaway for me from the survey. So we look at, okay, based upon their role within the office, how satisfied are they with the current policy? And it's kind of an interesting thought experiment to think where this might apply within the office outside of English proficiency. But essentially 68% of directors said they're satisfied with the policy, whereas 38% of scholar advisors said they're satisfied with the policy. This may be because the scholar advisors are more likely to be interacting with the scholars at the orientation, or more likely to run into those challenges. What elements of your J-1 English process would you like to improve? Number one response was increase consistency. Number two, improve the J-1 applicant experience. I'll speak real briefly to that. We've done English 3, we do a survey after they've taken our interview, and so we've done, they can opt into it. We've done well over 4,000 surveys, and I will say the number one priority for scholars nothing comes close is convenience. How quickly and how conveniently can they accomplish it? Can they take it any way, like anytime, anywhere on a schedule that works for them? Cost comes up occasionally, but not as frequently as we would have thought. It's really around convenience, and so that's a big factor there. And then in that same survey, we also ask how confident they are in their ability to perform in English in different scenarios. And just two quick takeaways. 19% of J1s reported that they are not confident in their ability to communicate in an emergency. That's essentially 1 in 5 scholars. And then 31% of J1s reported that they're not confident in their dependents' ability to communicate in an emergency. That's almost 1 in 3. Thought that was significant.
Okay, thank you, Moroni. So we wanted to cover a little bit too, and I know we're preaching to the choir here as far as what the regulations are, but we think it's valuable to just cover briefly before we jump into some of our campuses what the regulatory foundations are. So as you're all familiar with, the Code of Federal Regulations and then that J1 Subpart A that came out, this is really where everything started to change for a lot of our campuses, right? But specifically, I want to highlight these 2 red portions in this regulation. That as you look at that English proficiency, it needs to be determined by an objective measurement of the English language. And then that as the Department of State is really good at explaining, the purposes of the J1 program, right? It's a cultural exchange, and we want that to be a mutually beneficial thing for our country, as well as those, we hope, ambassadors that go back to their home countries and share those experiences. And so they want them to be able to function not just in the laboratory, not just in whatever research or work they might be doing, but on a day-to-day basis. Can they order a pizza when they need? Can they go into the supermarket and take care of shopping? Can they do insurance, pardon me, handle the insurance and medical field and things they might need to navigate? So 2 things to keep in mind, again, that we're going to talk about as we talk about some of the transitions and things we worked on our campuses. Objective measurement, and more than just being able to communicate in their field, they need to communicate in daily life while they're here. So, in 2019, the Department of State actually released some guidance directive that clarified a little bit more. We appreciate all the clarification we can get from our regulatory agencies, right? They said this: the department has observed from outreach and site reviews exchange visitors with noticeably poor English-speaking skills, which may indicate a sponsor has not screened prospective candidates for English language proficiency consistent with the Code of Federal Regulations. Inadequate English skills may lead to program deficiencies and compromise the health, safety, and welfare of exchange visitors. So very much, in line with the poll that we took, right? That the Department of State, it seems, is also very much concerned with the health and safety of those scholars, as well as their ability to complete their program objectives and things that they're here for. And so they mentioned that English language tests are maintained for a minimum of 3 years following completion of each exchange visitor program. So we know that this is a serious thing that the Department of State wants us to be looking at, and we know that there are really good, valid reasons why we do need this English proficiency. And so again, we wanted to cover some of those basics before we jump into some stories from our campuses and how we've handled some things. So I'm going to start with this question: why we reconsidered our J1 English policy. So let me tell you a little bit about our process and how we had navigated this. We ended up, so even before J1 Subpart A in 2015 came out, we were allowing for the departments, the individual PIs, to really navigate the English proficiency on their own. And so we would get, an interview or some phone call, or back then Skype, call from the faculty member who was bringing the scholar, and we would just ask them to say, yes, I've met with them, I've spoken with them, and they have enough English proficiency to be able to be okay here. Pardon me. And so one of the things that was challenging for us, so we ended up having a Department of State meet and greet visit where they came onto our campus, and that was wonderful, and we got to talk to a couple of great individuals from the Department of State. And we talked about our processes, and we were pretty open and honest about what we had seen on our campus, where as the RO or AROs were doing that orientation for new scholars, we could tell that they really struggled with their English language proficiency. And the thing that really got us is we were told by one of those Department of State representatives, if a scholar arrives without English proficiency, it is the responsibility of the responsible officer to send that scholar home. And that, as the RO at that time, that scared me to death, right? I don't know about you, but I'm not at all excited not only to send somebody home who just arrived, but then to go to their department and explain to them that I sent your scholar home, and he or she is not going to be able to have this experience on campus. And so that was really kind of an eye-opening thing for us, where we started to say maybe we need to do something different on our campus and make it more of an objective measurement as the regulations state. So turn some time over to Elise for his experience.
Well, unfortunately, I'm here to make all of your fears come true because we did go through an audit. So we unfortunately had a scholar that went through some very serious health issues, and it was not proficient enough to even get help. Not only not to get help, but the lack of proficiency was also a key part on why he could not get well. Like, it really impeded treatment for that scholar. And as you know, of course, we have to report that to the Department of State, and that triggered an audit. So we received this beautiful letter via email, and they wanted to make sure that our procedures for verifying English proficiency were accurate and were effective. Unfortunately, we were not. We were an institution that would basically only take the faculty, in fact, the PI sponsor, the PI statement, and that was not effective at all. As you all know, the PIs have a great stake on bringing their visitors here due to their own researches. And the Department of State did have many meetings with us, and they really pushed us to go through and develop more objective ways to verify the English proficiency. And I also want to say that one of the reasons why we did not have a strong English proficiency measurements in place, it was because of pushback of our higher administration. It's not because we did not notice that was a problem. We clearly did notice that was a problem. And we've been bringing it up, to the powers that be for a long time. However, it took us, having to go to a whole audit process, which we are still going through, almost a year, or actually after a year, since the incident happened, the Department of State made it quite clear that we're still under audit and they're still watching us through a microscope. But that's what unfortunately took for us to be able and empowered to sit and review and rethink how we were assessing the English proficiency for our J-1 students. Unfortunately, we did have to send a couple of J visitors home. We're moving a little bit more to a hybrid process now, where some departments we're still accepting their PI, but just like it happened with Sam, we were also told you are not to validate somebody that upon check-in you have noticed that they do not meet the English proficiency requirement. And interestingly enough, it happened twice for me, and I don't wish that upon anybody. But the second time that we sent somebody home, I got an email from our Department of State representative asking explanation. So because of course we presented all of the changes we had to her, but they were watching what we were doing, and they were like, well, if you're still sending people home, basically clearly what you have is not working. So what are you going to change now? So again, that is still very much a work in progress for us, but we have been making great progress, and a lot of it is due to the empowerment we got from the regulatory agency. But and I would actually ask Julie to comment on some of the things that she has seen, which was pretty funny with scholars and their English proficiency.
So this is my third institution working with J-1 exchange visitors and English language proficiency policies. And at my most recent institution was a health science center. When I started there, we allowed faculty sponsors to conduct the interview. And we gave them questions to ask, and we had them transcribe the responses. They could do it over Zoom or phone, and we would get submissions that were copied and pasted from Wikipedia, and that wasn't uncommon. We started to see a lot of similar responses. So in response to our question on what your favorite movie is, strangely, everyone loved The Pursuit of Happiness. I've never seen it, but apparently it's a really good movie. And sometimes we get submissions where they're English and frankly better than mine, and then they would show up and they would have a hard time describing how their flight went. So I had a lot of concerns about their ability to participate in the exchange program, their ability to communicate in the lab, especially when issues arose, and of course, anything that would come up, and actually we did have an incident involving a medical emergency. So I'll talk later about what our approach was, but we had a lot of concerns.
And if I may say something else, one of the key points that we got from the Department of State visit is that they wanted us to really document well how we assess the English proficiency. So they even in the letter itself, they did make a recommendation that we should either document it through a video or voice recording, or through very thorough notes. So that is part of what they want to see. They not only want to see that you are doing the work and making sure that the person is able to actually come and participate in their program and in daily life in the United States, but also that you have a good record track of how that was done. So that was a big part of it too. So now we're gonna go over to how we're implementing our new policies through campus.
Okay, thank you, Luis. And I always, to put into perspective as well, Luis, how many scholars do you have on your campus? You're gonna feel good about your campus in just a minute here, everybody.
So we have about 3,000 J-1 records at UF.
So whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, I call Luis and I just feel better immediately. So we appreciate that perspective from somebody who really has a lot of wonderful scholars on their campus.
I have a list for you.
So we wanted to talk about some of the options and things that we considered as we were looking at, making changes and trying to make this a stronger program. So on our campus, I think it's the same for the others as well, as we've discussed. One of the first places we turned to when we said, well, we can't just have the PI doing this interview anymore, is our English language department. We thought if we can do it internally and make it easier and get some support and help, that will be a much smoother process because it's internal. And our English language department was very kind, but very directly said, we don't have the bandwidth, we're not going to do that. Thanks, but no thanks. And so we then turned to our English language center and said, you teach English language as your whole mission. Is this something you could help with? And got the same response, that we would love to help, we don't have the bandwidth, unless you're giving us support and full-time equivalencies and human resource and money, then we couldn't handle that either. So we also considered on our end, again, that next level, right? Well, what about even internally with department administrators and people on our campus, and that pretty quickly went nowhere as well. Everybody was on board with wanting to help, but didn't have the ability and the resources to do so. We looked at a lot of standardized tests as well, and that's something that our campus still does accept, and that's not something that we've gone away from. So things like the TOEFL we'll still accept. But we have had quite a few people who've explained that that can be burdensome for their scholars, and so we worked through that. We looked inside our own office, the International Student and Scholar Services Office, and same thing, we don't have the bandwidth, and I don't know about you, but we're not trained in that. And to put that burden on an advisor who already is overwhelmed and trying to figure out how to best help navigate the regulations and the paperwork, to then say you need to be trained in English proficiency and how to assess that was too much for our department as well. And so that was a pretty quick no on our end as we looked at it. And so then we started looking out into the kind of the industry and saying, well, what other options are there for third-party assessments that might help? And so for our campus, that's where we landed on English 3 as an option. And very much for what Moroni mentioned, that as we investigated and talked about some of the concerns that we saw our scholars having or that we felt they would want in English testing, that convenience, the approach of how it's done, and also the cost were big reasons why we were exploring this with these third parties, and why ultimately we chose to add English 3 on top of the TOEFL scores and other things that we would accept. And so that was a little bit about our processes and how we went through trying to figure out on our campus, how do we comply and make this safer and better. Elise and Julie, what about you two?
So I kind of skipped all the other options by the time I got to my second institution. I think the reason for that is I really didn't want the university involved. I wanted someone who was independent, unbiased. They didn't have any stake in the game in terms of whether or not they were bringing the J-1 exchange visitor to contribute to biomedical research in the lab. And frankly, from a standpoint of efficiency, it was nice to have a system to make your processes better, and we didn't have to get any English language department or anything involved on campus. So we went straight. When we found out about English 3, we thought, oh, this is exactly what we've been looking for.
Yeah, in our case too, we tried to look at all of our options. And our English Language Institute also, they said, we can try to help it the way we can. We can be, like a tiebreaker in the case, somebody wants to appeal, but we cannot do it for every single scholar for many reasons. We don't have all of the staffing. We don't have, the ability to accommodate the different time zones and etc. Another thing that also dissuade us from, besides not having enough people to work on it all the time, but dissuade us to pursue, the interview done within our own office, is the fact that we would definitely get pushback from the faculty saying exactly what Sam said. You are not qualified to do this. Like, what makes you qualified to assess someone's English proficiency? So yeah, that all was very much into consideration in what we were doing too.
Okay, so we're going to transition now, and we say some of these things, and it sounds like it was just a smooth, process, and everything went great. And I always appreciate in sessions hearing about some of the challenges as well as you evaluate and look at new directions. So we'll turn some time over to Julie to talk about those approaches and some of the pushback.
I feel like I'm always the one presenting the challenges. So we obviously had a lot of issues, and we were thinking about how to approach this. And frankly, I think we got to the point where we were so concerned about our J-1 exchange visitors and so concerned about our J-1 program that we took a pretty rigid and inflexible approach. We removed the ability for the PI, the principal investigator, or the faculty sponsor, whatever that may be, to conduct the interview. But we did it in a way where we got buy-in from the institution first. And English 3 helped us with putting together a PowerPoint. We had a lot of really good data. I presented it to Dean's Council. They loved it. They approved it. Not that we needed their approval, but they blessed it. So I felt really confident about implementing this change and what that response would look like, because we had that buy-in from the deans and from my leadership. And initially we didn't have a lot of pushback. Just slowly it started to trickle in. But eventually, when there was a lab transferring from another institution, one of the J-1 exchange visitors participated in the English 3 interview and didn't get a score of 3, which we required. We allow no flexibility in that So if you didn't get a 3, you could retake it. But otherwise, if you didn't meet any of the other options that we had, you couldn't come. So that created a lot of concern and resistance, and it quickly escalated between the PI and the dean and the president of the institution. And I firmly stood my ground and reminded them that they had approved this policy and all the issues that we had. But we continued to have issues over time to the point where, the institution currently is reconsidering its policies and practices. And I think that when other institutions allowed it, and specifically our faculty sponsors would cite these Ivy League schools, they allow it, why wouldn't we allow it? It was really difficult for us to respond to over time. So at Vanderbilt, we're taking an entirely different approach. We're adding English 3 as an option alongside the department interview. We see a lot less issues at Vanderbilt, so that makes it obviously easier. But we're going to do a lunch and learn in a couple weeks, and Rona is going to talk about English 3, and we're going to really take an educational approach, first with the department admins, and if the department decides that they want to require English 3 and not allow the department interview, then that's something that that they can do. And unless the Department of State issues very clear guidance, removing the department interview as an option, that's probably the approach that we're going to continue to take. But in looking back, I wish that my approach at my other school had been different. I wish that I hadn't been so rigid and we would have allowed for more remediation. We would have created a committee to review lower scores, or we did allow them to retake the assessment. That was something that we did do, and frankly, often they did get a 3, in the second try. So, or allow previous participation to count. So, there are different approaches that you can take. It definitely depends on the politics and the culture of your institution, but I would really think about that before implementing anything. And Elise, I know you talked a little bit about your approach, but did you want to add to that here?
I think you covered pretty much everything. We did start, with the lunch and learn. We did have Moroni come to our campus. And I'd say it was pretty successful, just having the buy-in from especially our departmental admins who are doing the groundwork, and, educating them so they can educate their own leaders on why is it better to do this way. And again, like everything else in higher ed, flexibility is always the key to the success. That's my opinion, at least.
Sam, what about you?
I don't know what you're talking about. Our faculty never push back on our campus. No, we got quite a few, faculty members who, when we started this and were changing, we got very upset individuals saying the same kind of thing. How come you don't trust us? And it was really nice for us, and I don't know if we have any Department of State reps here or not, but where we were able to say, we had visitors from the Department of State come to our campus and tell us directly, you need to change this process. You need to have an objective, more consistent, measurable way to do this. That even though there was still pushback, that really bridged a lot of the challenges for us to say this isn't coming from us, this is the government regulation, and we're trying to keep these scholars safe. So that was really helpful, and I'll echo what you said, Julie. I think it'd be wonderful if the Department of State were able to give more clarity and kind of direct objectives with some of that when it comes to the PI interviews.
Great, so we're still in the process of changing our approach at Vanderbilt. But Sam, do you want to talk about how things are working today?
So like I said, and I'll cover this quickly, we have had some of those pushbacks, and one of the biggest ones was the added cost, right? And so there are a lot of ways that we tried to bridge that to say, you know what, you can defer that to the scholar, you can pay for that as a department, and we found that there are cheap options, and that educational piece that I think you talked about is really important, because a lot of the times when we're just telling on our campus, this is the way we're going to do it, they don't know all the details, and they imagine that it's far too expensive or far too inconvenient. And so having that educational piece has really been helpful for a lot of the pushback from us. For our campus, we feel like it's been a really successful transition, even though it didn't happen overnight, that we're now at a point where people understand on our campus, faculty understand that this is the process. And so that pushback really doesn't come as much. And where we found also some of the best success was with the department secretaries, where we actually held an event for everybody, all the department secretaries. So I don't know if your campus is the same, but they're the ones who we often interface with as they're reaching out to find out information for some faculty members. And they've been some of our great allies on campus too, to help make sure that the faculty know from the beginning, this is the process you have to follow if you're bringing a scholar to campus. Again, kind of that alignment with the regulations, we hit that really hard to make sure that was a big part of our educational piece. And on our side as the International Student Office, it's been really nice not to have that same burden to feel like we have to assess that English language and we have to be the ones to send them home. And we still would have to do that, but we see a lot fewer challenges with English proficiency now that we've gone to this new approach. Pardon me. Again, back to that original purpose of the J-1 program. We talk about that very openly with our faculty and our departments, that the purpose is that cultural exchange. It's not necessarily just the research or the teaching that they'll be doing. One of the things that I wanted to also share is that we had concerns when we first started this, that this might reduce the number of scholars to our campus. And this was pre-pandemic, so this wasn't, obviously that's done some things for our campuses with the travel restrictions and all. But we found that honestly, that hasn't been an issue at all. There was, even those that were complaining or frustrated, still were taking the assessments and were able to come. And those who didn't get the score, we also require a 3 on English 3. And those who didn't get it, there have been very few, but they've been able to work at it and get up to the levels that they need to be able to come. And so we haven't seen any kind of a challenge with the numbers and the levels. And you can read here, 94% of those who received a score below the institution's requirement, this is specific to the English 3 test, who then met with an English 3 tutor, then received a 3 or higher within 1 month. And that's very much been our experience, that for the few times that scholars haven't gotten the 3, we've been able to say, you have the option to work with English 3 or with a language tutor and take it again. And it's been a very quick turnaround for them to be able to come up to that proficiency that they needed. And so that's been really nice. Anything to add from Luis and Julie on theirs?
I would just add that it really depends on the support you have on your campus. So if you have an English language center, which we do have at Vanderbilt, and if someone comes in with a lower score, and you have those support services, that's fantastic. That's a benefit of the exchange visitor program. If someone comes here, they may not have the level of English that they necessarily need to have, but if there are resources and if there's intention towards supporting them, then you have more ability to be able to provide those services.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And in our case too, we just trying to broadcast it that the bones of the J program is intercultural exchange. J program is not a work-based visa. That's not the reason why the J-1 visa exists, the J-1 program exists. So yes, it allows them to do some incidental work, but the objective is for intercultural exchange. So we've been trying also to make sure we strengthen this message to help everybody understand that it is an important goal, and it's one of our oldest visas.
Okay, thank you. I think I'd summarize it by saying it hasn't been easy. No transition is easy on a campus, but I do feel like we're in a much, much better place, and I think our campus feels that way, even our leadership as well, because of that. So again, really quickly, just to detail, this is our process and how we do it. And so typically, whatever host department is asking to bring that scholar will reach out to us. We have some who bring quite a few, and so they know the process well. If it's a newer person, a newer experience for a faculty member or a department, pardon me, they'll reach out and they'll ask about what the needs are. And so we'll talk to them about all of the materials that we need, and we have an e-form that we work with in synapses that they fill out to provide passports and all the details. But we'll tell them at that point, and point them to our website and written material, that they also need to have some type of English proficiency, whether it's the TOEFL or English 3. We also allow if they've attended and graduated from an institution in the United States previously that was English speaking, we'll allow that. And so we'll go through those options. We find that the vast majority of those who don't already have some type of test score that they can use then end up turning to English 3 and getting that done pretty quickly. And so on the English 3 side, what that looks like for our campus, they'll go and they'll complete the interview with them and the process with them. And as soon as that's done, then an email is sent to the ISSS office saying that there is an updated score and video that you can watch, and we have the option to go in and then review all of that testing on our end. And so it's kind of integrated seamlessly through the process now at this point. And that's been really nice and fluid for our campus. Okay, Julie.
So like Sam mentioned, you can set who gets the email with a link to the video, so you can see who's coming before they even before the department even submits the J-1 request, if you'd like. And the exchange visitor gets a copy of the interview score report, and you can access all the videos, which is pretty neat because you work with English 3 to determine the questions. So let's say, for example, what are you most excited about in terms of your exchange visitor program? What are you most concerned about? So you get to know your population before they even arrive. I really liked that benefit. And then if a department says, they only got a score of 2.0, but we thought they had great English language skills, you can go back, share the video with them, review it together, and decide, does this really, are they able to operate on a day-to-day basis? Marina, did you want to add anything to that?
Maybe just on the next slide, I'll mention, so this is kind of a breakdown of the rubric of this scale, so it's 1 to 5. About 70% of universities go with a 3. And some go with a 2.5, and then others offer flexibility. Like I know one institution that says it's a 3, but if it's a 2.5, and they submit, the department submits a letter saying why a 2.5 is sufficient. So there's some flexibility there, but that's pretty much what's typical.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add to that is, again, it depends on the support that you have on your campus. So we plan to create a course for anyone who gets a 2.5 at our English Language Center. They can take conversation courses or other courses and improve it to a 3.0 later. Do we want to share this video here, or?
No, I think we can just probably go to. Well, I'll just say essentially the format is it's a 20-minute conversation, like interview, kind of simulating a conversation. So they'll watch a video question. It's a short question. And they can see the expression of the individual trying to simulate an interaction in person. And then they have time to respond to whatever the question is. And it goes through a series of questions that are being pulled from a large bank of questions. And so we try to make it a comfortable experience, but it's completed in about 20 to 25 minutes by the scholar.
And they can complete it anywhere at any time, which is very convenient. Elise, do you want to talk about recommendations for best practice moving forward?
Yes. So again, just going back to what I said before, I think it's really important for you to have a very objective and consistent way to measure the English proficiency that will improve your compliance. If you ever get, in an audit or anything, you will have a strong paper trail, you'll show that your J-1 program is a strong program based on, X, Y, or Z objectives that you have identified to measure your visitors' English proficiency. It also reduces the burden on both your office and their host department once you have somebody that can, that are able to communicate with them, and also once you have a process set
because everybody will know what to do. It improves tremendously the experience of your exchange visitor. As I said, it is a visa that does have a small diplomatic component to it, so the exchange of that, of ideas and cultures is expected, and also will allow your visitor to actually enjoy their time in the United States and explore, you know, the country and the city, and you know, while they're here. Also, just by having English 3, that will, you know, make it. It is a very smooth implementation, to be quite honest. It allows you to quickly set up. You work with Moroni's team, and they are really great on addressing all of the issues you may have and all of the implementation. As well as it still gives you the, like Julie said, the control over who's coming and who's not coming. So I think it's overall, it has been a great experience for us. It checks all of the boxes that you would need to check for an eventual visit, and the implementation is quite seamless on our end.
Thanks, Luis. Yeah, so whatever you do, we do recommend that, you know, you're looking at these kinds of things as you try and improve what's on your campus. And again, thinking back to the beginning and even the poll, and I really, can we say what I like about our own presentation? But I really appreciate the data that is shared from these surveys that have been done. And I found on my campus, these slides are available. You can grab those from the app as well. And sharing some of that data has been helpful to be able to share the story about the trends and what's happening in the field is a powerful tool. So we encourage you to use that as well. With that, we're happy to take any questions if there are any, and just we'll say thank you beforehand for coming to this session. So, are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Sam, and the rest of your panel. Really helpful. I actually have two questions. One, did any of you consider Duolingo? And I haven't obviously looked at all of your information, but the second is, do you need IT support to integrate English 3, and how did that work?
Good questions. Anyone want to take those before I do? Oh, yeah, sorry, she asked two questions. First, did anyone consider Duolingo? And then two, what kind of IT support was needed to do that integration into the software?
I'll just comment on the IT support. So there's a Teradata integration and the Synapsys integration. Teradata integration is very straightforward, and our team can help with that. And then International Office Consulting can help with the Synapsys integration. So they've been wonderful with helping with the Synapsys integration. And that's free.
As for the Duolingo part, yes, we did think about it, but I did see some issues with Duolingo. First of all, is the integration, and second of all is what I really appreciate on English 3 is the access that I have to the interview and the ability that I have to share that interview. You know, just like Sam and Julie covered, if there are any questions about the visitor's English proficiency, we know that can be shared, and we can sit and discuss over it. So that was the plus for me. I don't know if you have anything, Julie.
Honestly, I can't remember what that conversation looked like with Duolingo, but I do recall better access to the information, the videos with English 3. And I would say, you know, regardless of what you choose, look at how long it does take to implement. For us with English 3, you know, Moroni is basically like, whenever you're ready to go, you know, we'll open it up. So.
I would echo that too. We did look at other options, and again, I'll echo what you said, Julie. Whatever you choose, just make sure you're finding what's best for your campus. And on our campus, that ease of implementation was a big deal as far as the timeliness that we were looking at. On our end, it did require minimal update, like on our website. We added that as an option, and we had to create the links, but that's pretty simple as far as the integration from the ISSS side. Great questions. Yes, there in the back.
My question is, how do you determine, I'm assuming you allow some waivers depending on where the person is coming from, or where they
Really great question. He asked, how do you determine which countries you'll accept as waivers for English language testing?
So in US case, we mirror admissions, the admissions list. Whatever country admissions waives English proficiency for, you know, the students, we waive for the scholars. That's what we go by.
We actually do it a little bit different, and that's one thing we didn't talk about with the other options in our English language proficiency. I think we're speaking mostly to the department interview, but for us, we don't have a list. You have to show that you graduated from an institution that was taught primarily in English. So if you came from, the UK, you still have to provide a diploma or a transcript from an institution where, so then we don't have to make a list. We don't have to determine whether or not, that country is predominantly English speaking.
And ours is the same as Luis. We have on our admissions website an actual list, and we follow that for the scholars as well. Great question. Others, yes?
I actually have a very similar question, but relating to the testing scores as an alternative. How do you decide? Are you mimicking like student admissions for which scores you use, or did you come up with your own list?
So yes, how do you decide which scores to use? Are you mimicking the student side, or you come up with your own options there?
We just mimic the graduate school to be consistent, which are pretty high scores. Honestly, most of them didn't achieve it, and that's why a lot of them went to the department interview or later English 3.
Yeah, we're the same. We mimic the same for our undergraduate and graduate admission scores that we require. Now we did with the English 3 specifically, we looked at it as a staff in my office to say where do we feel comfortable and why. And it did help, I won't lie, to know that the majority of the universities are using a similar score. That was helpful, at least comforting on my end. So
That was the same exact process that we followed. I really have nothing to add.
from now on, I just call Julie and Luis and say what you do. It makes it all easier. Any other questions? Yes.
For Luis, were you notified about the English proficiency from an incident report that was done?
I'm sorry, say that again?
She said, were you?
You were going to say, you did an incident report regarding the exchange visitor, and that's how it was highlighted that they weren't English proficient?
Exactly, yes. That's how they caught us by, by reading the incident report we filed. That's absolutely right.
Okay, any others? Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and for all those traveling today and tomorrow, please be safe, and we appreciate your attendance today. So have a good one.